This is Candid Frank Live. He's Aaron William Freeland, and I'm wearing a turtleneck. That's the second time I've worn a turtleneck in the last 6 weeks. I'm wearing a turtleneck because my sore throat. I got another one of those. Well, I had a summer cold. Now I have a fall cold.
Excellent. Now all you'll need is to get the winter sniffles and
Yeah,
the spring sneezies, and you'll have the
and
full
then,
year.
are there any other things on the bingo card I need to fill?
There's a fifth booster. Is it fifth booster now?
That's a
Something like
different bingo card.
that.
Yeah, it is. It's the fifth booster.
Yeah, I know.
Well, now they're going to. I think this is probably going to be the last year where um, the RSV vaccine is what's coming out now, right?
Right. Yeah, the
And
latest variants.
next year it'll be all part of the flu shot. Maybe, I don't know.
We'll have to see what happens.
That's all right. We'll do our imitation of being a pincushion. Speaking of pincushions, the Edmonton Elks. Well, we're talking the Canadian Football League. So the Argos have clinched. So have Winnipeg and Argos have clinched first and home field advantage on November 11th for whoever shows up for that game, whether it be Montreal or Hamilton. Outside chance of it being Ottawa and maybe somebody from the West, but the Argos are the home team on November 11th. We've seen some really interesting games. The Elks beat the Stamps, who are headed for the first time in 15 since 2000 15 years, I think, 15 or 16 years since they didn't make the playoffs. They lost to the Elks 25-23, and the Elks are building this new reputation of coming in late and quick.
And there is a certain amount of truth to that. They're currently 4-11, right behind Calgary at 4-10. So they are sort of establishing a bit of a reputation for themselves as coming in late. That's true. Um, but yeah, uh, you know, Taquan Missile's TD helped the Lions get past the Elks 37-29. That certainly didn't help them. BC has now clinched a playoff berth. Winnipeg, and Toronto are the three confirmed so far. So happy to see that. Um, it's I don't know if we're going to see a crossover this year, Frank. I'm hoping
Well,
not.
I don't think we're going to see a crossover. I mean, one thing we're assured of, and that is that you've got a team that looks unbeatable in the Argos at this point. You got two teams that are really going at it in the West, and you got the Alouettes and the Tiger Cats, the opponents for the Argos. Yet Saturday, the Argos won 29-14, minus their two-star running backs, and they handled Hamilton really well, but really it comes down to, again, where the Argos make less mistakes than the opposition, and when the opposition makes a mistake, they make the opposition pay. And this was another one of those games. Those guys have shown that, definitively speaking, they're going to win because you make mistakes. The Argos have been very opportunistic, and they were in this game too, Aaron, because without those changes of possession, immediate changes of possession for touchdowns, close to touchdowns, the Argos don't win this game as handily as it looked.
No, that is very true. And I think the one thing that we've come to realize this year is that their their defense is very good at waiting until you make mistakes. They don't allow a lot of yards. They don't concede a lot of yards. Special teams has been absolutely fantastic running the ball back for them, and at the same time, Kelly's been doing some absolutely spectacular stuff under center, but it's not so much that wins them the games as the for example, this time around, when McManus had a 58-yard interception for a touchdown. there's
Yeah.
there's your defense doing exactly what it needs to do to help you win games. So
And what they've done historically this season, that's exactly what they've done. He did throw a couple of interceptions, and there was a fumble by Leak. He fumbled the ball on a kick return. So there were mistakes made by the Argos, and one thing we learn with each season, and it's becoming very, very clear in the Canadian Football League, is that if you make mistakes, you might end up paying. And if you don't, you'll end up losing. My point being that there are always mistakes made for whatever reason. What you do with those mistakes, whether you're on the opportunistic side or the fatalistic side, whichever, if it's a fatality for you, then it could be a game changing thing. But it always comes down to, can you make the big play when it's necessary? And the Argos did that against the Ticats. They held them to a 2 and out, something they needed to do. Or 3 and out actually, but that's the Argos are a great team, the best Argo team at this point in the season. They're the first team to be 12-1. They were the first team to be 11-1. They're probably one of the first teams in a while that have clinched a home field advantage, first place, in a very long time. I mean, having 6 games, my goodness, that's much. But the Ticats look good and bad. They look both, and they've got a few weeks to work it out. And Aaron, I hear Bo Levi Mitchell is getting he's starting to throw the ball around. Will he make a difference?
That is actually something I'd be very interested to see. Ever since leaving the Stamps, it's been a question of, will the old Bo Levi Mitchell return? And if he's starting to take reps under center again, then I think that is good news for Vancouver, potentially bad news for everybody else. Um,
Mhm.
I don't want to jinx it or anything like that, but it would be good to see him back on the field again. Just,
Absolutely.
you know,
And then we had the Alouettes defeating the Stamps 28-11, ensuring that the Stamps don't make the playoffs. This is something, last week, as I had the notes from last week up there, Edmonton beating the Stamps, and now the Alouettes beat the Stamps, and now the Stamps are really in unusual territory, not making the playoffs. And you've got a coach that became the GM this year. There's a lot of things, and they talked about it on the panel. I talked about it early when they made the decision. The problem, he has to adjust to having both positions, because both positions do not talk the same way or act the same way. They require a different attitude towards the team, whether it be individual players or as a group. So I think the adjustment situation is something that he has to go through. But I think the biggest thing, and please tell me what you think, the problem is at quarterback, not making the big plays when he needs to make the big plays. He's looked good, just hasn't looked good when it mattered.
yeah, that is always the hallmark of an excellent player, and in particular, yeah, that does seem to be Calgary's Achilles heel, if you will, for all intents and purposes. It's the inability to finish off the big play, to get the score, to finish off in the red zone. That seems to have been their downfall this year.
Yeah, and it is what it is, and they've been in the playoffs for a very long time. They've had a really good team for a very long time. This is a down time for them, but don't count them out. They'll be back in the hunt. Maybe not this year, but next year or the following year. It's a great organization, just falling on hard times right now. And the Alouettes needed that victory because they want home field advantage. They might have lost home field advantage in the final, but they can still get home field advantage in the game against the Ticats if the Ticats are the opponent.
And again, that remains to be seen, because Ottawa's been coming in hot as well. So there's
We'll
that
see how that
possibility.
works out.
Yeah.
The Lions beat the Elks 37-29 in Edmonton. Not a happy moment for the fans. It's been a while since they lost a game at home.
But Taquan Mizell had a pair of touchdowns for the BC Lions, so that I think helped seal that out. Vernon Adams had 265 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is BC's third in a row, so they're picking up a little bit of momentum here. Uh, Trey Ford on the other side of the ball didn't play all that badly. Had 182 yards, went had 182 yards, sorry, and 2 touchdown passes. Didn't help the cause at the end of the day, but there are signs of life, which I think is a good thing.
The Lions have been hot and cold, and the Elks ran into a hot Lion team. The Red Blacks defeated the Riders 36-28. The Red Blacks giving their faint hopes, a little rise in making the playoffs. The Riders, on the other hand, need to be careful. If Edmonton or Calgary decide to go on a run, they'll be in danger of not making the playoffs. And this is a team, the Riders, that again, this is like the Lions and like some other teams like the Alouettes, good teams that are just playing inconsistent. And this was a game that they should have done better. They didn't. It really mattered, but the Red Blacks on the road beat the Riders.
Crum has been a pleasant surprise this season. There's been times that he's played really well. There's been times that he's played badly. In this particular instance here, though, he was a very pleasant surprise. I mean, he ran for a 35-yard score, sorry, that led to a significant lead for the Red Blacks after conversion. Um, Dolagala has been interesting. At least he's been relatively consistent for them as well. Um, but yeah, this was one of those games where it looked like it could have been close, but then the doors fell off. So
But the Riders and the Ticats have one thing in common, is that they lost their number one quarterbacks early in the season. And all you can ask the next quarterback that comes in, or the team, is to stay in the hunt for the playoffs. Both those teams have done that for both those quarterbacks. So let's not forget that however good Donagala has been, there's always Harris in their back pocket. And the same thing's true for Powell and Hamilton. They have a former MVP, Grey Cup champ, and Bo Levi Mitchell in there in the background. So it's going to make for an interesting finish to the season. We've in the West, all the games matter. There isn't going to be much resting of players there. The Argos are pretty much the only team that are pretty. Well, they are the only team that's set on where they're going to be come the playoffs. Right? They're not out. They're in fact in, and they're also the home team on November 11th. Nobody else can say that. Other teams are trying to get to the playoffs. So this is an interesting situation. Sitting players, you can't. The guys that they put in, they got to go full steam. The worst thing to happen is when you're not going full steam and you're not all in a football game. That's when you can get injured. So that's the hazard the Argos have to deal with.
now I know Dinwiddie also mentioned the fact that he was going to be sitting some of his more banged up players over the course of the next little while, and I completely understand that. Where we're currently sitting right now, nobody can pass us. So this is the ideal time for some players to take some time off. It honestly, I don't think it matters uh, who we're playing or the results of those particular games at this point. We know where we're going to be. It's now just a question of getting through the playoffs themselves. I mean, I know that we're going to be playing Winnipeg on Friday. That is going to be a very entertaining game to say the least. And the week after that, we've got Edmonton on the Friday, and then the week after that, we've got Ottawa on the 14th. Um, as everything rolls along, those are the opportunities right there to uh, sit players like AJ Wallet and sit players that need the time to get back to 110%. So
Well, you've got Toronto will be playing Winnipeg, and Winnipeg has proven to us this season that they are an angry team. If motivated, they use their anger to be motivated. And I'm sure there'll be a little animosity towards the team that won the Grey Cup.
well, of course, everybody wants to beat
Yeah.
last year's guy. You know.
Yeah, especially when they beat you to do it.
Yep.
So you've got Saskatchewan and BC. So BC's hands will be for Montreal and Ottawa. There's the beginning of what you're talking about. In Calgary, let's see how they can bounce back against Hamilton in Hamilton. We really don't know how that'll work out, but we've got a really interesting situation here. You've got Ottawa playing Montreal back-to-back games. If they beat Montreal in both games, the complexion of who makes the playoffs changes drastically. Drastically. These two games that Ottawa will be playing, very interesting. Hamilton, on the other hand, is in the West, and you know, Saskatchewan in the next week, 2 weeks from now, week 18. Well, it's gonna be fun. That's all I can say. This is the part of the season I like the most. Let's talk about soccer and Ontario soccer in particular. Ontario soccer refs start wearing body cams. What?
That's correct. Uh, this is one of those things where it's not for the kids. It's well, technically speaking, it is for the kids, but
Well, it's for
as it
everyone.
currently stands, there are 50 body cameras that are available to approximately 6,000 referees across Ontario. Johnny Misley says that the effort is the first of its kind in North America. The British Football Association rolled out a similar project earlier this year, but really, it's to help out the referees. Um, for example, just last year, a 16-year-old girl referee was surrounded by parents in a parking lot after refereeing a match and was physically assaulted by those parents. In another instance, a player who received a red card in a men's game chased a referee around the field with a machete. So, having these body cams is kind of a good way to sort of temper that and make the parents realize we're gonna expose your bad behavior. I mean, um, an individual here a lady by the name of Angelina Baldino, who's 21 years old. She's in her fifth year of refereeing. There have been some past instances where parents have followed her to her car in the parking lot, and it's one of those things where you have to provide a buffer for your officials. Otherwise, sports and youth sports in particular are going to fail. And it's just behavior of some parents is just not acceptable.
Anybody wants to understand that the level of animosity, hatred, and intimidation, if it appears to be acceptable behavior, it will be repeated over and over and over again. There has to be a deterrent, and the deterrent is to make people accountable for that behavior. But when when our leaders do that kind of stuff, what are we expected to believe the followers are going to do? They're called followers. The follower is the opposite of leader, right? So leaders are responsible for ensuring the followers have a good example. I know it sounds corny, and now it sounds 60s, but hey, I'm going there and I'm sticking to it. Let's talk about MLS, and good luck with those body cams. Toronto FC beaten by New York FC. Winless road run continues, and not a very pretty loss either.
Yeah, I'm this is their 19th winless road game. Uh, this is uh, just a season of abject failure. Um, Toronto is now 4-16-10 on the season. They managed to give the ball away for both of the first two goals. Uh, the New York City Football Club basically just punished them after that. It's a case where they couldn't seem to do anything right, and they just made everything worse. I think in the past series of games that they've been winless on the road, and in their past 8 games in particular, Toronto's been outscored 24-1,
Wow,
which just
that's
does
terrible.
not bode well. I'm not sure what's happened to this team or what it is that's not working. But man, something's got to happen. Something's got to give.
Well,
Those poor
the,
fans.
they appear to have checked out, and hopefully, when next year rolls around, they'll have checked in, which essentially is what's got to happen. Hopefully, the change in manager will make a difference. A fresh outlook. I don't know if the GM should keep his job, but we're going to find out about that. It's not the off season yet. It's just a really interesting situation for Toronto FC. They need a lot of work to be done. Let's talk about the good news, bad news Blue Jays. Today we talk about the good news. Springer gets an inside the park home run. They win 9-5. They're 2 games up, with a handful of games left, and they're playing the Yanks, who haven't been playing well lately.
I think the Yankees have now officially been mathematically eliminated. So, in a
Yeah,
way
they have.
that's something to be happy about. So, yeah, there's that. But yeah, Springer hit an absolutely fantastic inside the park home run. Went deep into a corner. The player went to field it. It went off the wall at a weird angle and just sort of rolled in towards center field. Um, Springer had the chance to make sure that he got all the way around.
Yep,
Uh, but yeah, this is one of those situations where everything that needed to go right went right, and everything that could have gone wrong for the opposition absolutely went horrifically wrong. Uh, Kirk
absolutely.
was on fire today, throwing people out, calling it great from behind the plate. Bichette got his 20th home run, and Guerrero got his 25th and 26th home runs in that game. Things just seem to be working out at just the right time for them in this particular instance. Taking uh, taking them, where they need to be. 2 out of 3 wins for this, taking the series against Tampa Bay, coming back here against the Yankees. It'll be interesting to close out the season.
Yeah, the Jays are up against it with the Rangers, Astros, and Mariners. There's a wild card position left. Make that two wild card positions, and there's first place in the West, and then there's the Jays. So it's an interesting little war that the Jays find themselves in the middle of. And the good news is that those teams, those three Western teams, are playing Western teams, and so the Jays are the masters of their own destiny. They just have to beat the teams they're playing, like the Yankees, like they did with Tampa Bay, 2 or 3, I think they took, right. So that's all they have to do. They take 2 or 3 from the Yankees, and they'll be on their way because those other teams are beating each other up, and that's something the Jays can look forward to. I'll tell you, they've gone from not being able to put people across home plate with bases loaded, 2 guys on base, 1 guy on. It doesn't matter. They have had this thing this year where they can't bring guys home.
It's the strangest thing. And, the Jays are currently sitting in fourth in their league and seventh overall in Major League Baseball, and they are on the cusp of not making the playoffs. I'm not sure how any of this makes any sense whatsoever. It just seems to me like the formula that MLB has for teams getting into the playoffs is fundamentally broken.
Well, I agree. Well, I agree that that's the perception, but let me throw this towards you and for the people out there. They've opened it up to 3 wild cards, Aaron. They've added 3 wild cards, and even to your point, even those 3 wild cards don't appear to be enough to help, create some sort of fairness. But it is what it is, and well, we'll see what happens. Last year, the Jays finished at the top of the wild cards, and stuff didn't happen the way it's supposed to for them. And this year that they might get another chance. They won't be at the top this time, so they get to be the underdog, play the underdog role, if you will. And maybe this will be their year to make it to past the wild card. Be interesting.
For sure. And, it's something that Toronto fans richly deserve, is to see their team get past the wild card round at least.
Yeah, it's been a while. 93 is a while ago.
Yeah.
But then
You
there's
know how it is.
some teams, Aaron, haven't been there. 93's like a short time for some.
This is very true.
For some. Let's talk about the National Hockey League, and let's talk about the Maple Leafs. They're back. They're back playing again. They lost 3-2 to the Sens. I'm going to write it off to not enough depth on the ice.
I'm going to put it down to the fact that the Leafs lineup was 60% Marlies.
I think we just said the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Didn't we
pretty
just
much.
pretty
I
much
mean,
said
on a night where the Sens trotted out Kachuk and
yeah.
Sokolov
Well, it's their
and
home game, right?
well, yeah, they had to do
This
it.
is what happens in the preseason. The
Yeah.
home team loads the team up because they don't want to be embarrassed on their home ice. So the odds of them winning are very good. So we'll see now tonight. The Leafs will be playing at home, and the Sens will be returning the favor. Let's see what that looks like. But Aaron, you followed the Sens last year. You saw that, and you and I both believe that, except for some ill-fated play, this is a team that could make the playoffs. And this year, the telling is going to be, we talked about this before, how they start the season and how they play the middle of the season. They need to have a consistently good game that they're playing to make it to the playoffs. They were so high and so low and low for too long that they didn't make the playoffs last year. This year could be different.
Well, if the first period was any indication of the way things are going to be going last night,
Uh-oh.
the the,
Uh-oh.
the Leafs got outshot 24-7 in the first period.
Uh-oh.
It was a miracle that they were only down 2-0 at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Petrozelli did actually play really, really well. Now, the Leafs flipped the script a little bit in the second period. They outshot the Senators 17-4 in the middle frame. And managed to tie the game 2-2. They ended up closing the game with more shots than the Senators, but unfortunately, the Senators got a little bit lucky, I think, and there we go. There was a lot of
Process.
ding in that game.
process. That's all you're working on here. You're
Yeah.
identifying talent, see how the players can play that won't be playing on your team. So that's what that's about. The Jets beat the Oilers 2-1. They're a team with a new captain and basically, well, we talk about the Jets not being able to keep their star players because they're in Winnipeg. This is a team that's challenged, and they've got some really good players. And I hope they can make it work. You know, it really is disappointing every year to be able to talk about Canadian teams that lose really talented players. And there's always these excuses made or no excuses made. Regardless, they head in the other direction all the time. So hopefully the Jets can continue this kind of trend. The Oilers, what happened in this game, Aaron?
Well, this is a game that actually went to the shootout, and on the goal that Perfetti scored, the puck was actually rolling. It was more a function of it kind of bamboozling the goalie a little bit for the win, but it's something that we'll take, as it's always those little things that help you win the game. Um,
I sense a little sensibility of goaltending for some unknown reason.
Yeah, you know what? It's an interesting situation for Edmonton. Uh, I don't even know if Hellebuck's actually been locked down for the foreseeable future, but it's still an interesting situation. Dominic Toninato actually had the regulation score, the regulation time goal for the Jets, and Zach Hyman was the one who replied for the Oilers. Ex Leafs everywhere. Um, it was 7:55 into the opening period before we actually saw a goal. Um, Toninato scored on a breakaway, and he actually managed to put it between the legs of Olivier Rodrigue. There we go. My tongue is not too tied. Um, However, the Oilers actually got it back with about 6 minutes left in the first period. Hyman picked up a rebound in front off a Ryan Nugent Hopkins point shot and put it past Colin Delia. So that's where we stood for the rest of the game. Um, Edmonton dressed 11 players considered locks for the regular season, while Winnipeg only dressed 9. So I'm not sure if that indicates any other issues that Edmonton may have to take care of. But uh, all in all, a decent game to watch.
An indecent game was the next game.
Oh, that was
Flames 10-0 over the Knuckleheads.
that was a bit of a horror show. I caught various parts of the game, but
Happy to have left the other coach behind.
combination of that and
New GM.
Johnny Hockey's gone, whole bunch of other changes. But yeah, 5-0, half 7 minutes into the first period, you knew it was going to be a very long night for Vancouver. But yeah, Coronado and Huberdeau did the majority of the scoring. So Coronado had a hat trick and an assist for 4 points. Uh, it's one of those games where, not for lack of trying on the Canucks goalie's part, but everything that Calgary shot towards the net seemed to have eyes and seemed to find the back of it.
Coyotes beat the Kings 5-3. The new ownership of Ottawa Senators have been approved.
Yeah, so exciting news. The Coyotes beating the Kings 5-3 was actually at Rod Laver Arena in Australia. So they closed the roof in the middle of summer and threw ice down and actually managed to have a decent competition out of it. So coupled with the fanaticism for coupled with the fanaticism that they actually have for the Australian indoor hockey league or Australian ice hockey league, uh,
And an
you
LA
know,
King.
it was very well attended. Oh well, yeah. There's the hometown boy on the LA Kings always helps, right? So Rod Laver Arena looked to be relatively well attended. It only holds 15,000 people in the first place, but it was good to see. Good to
There were a
see
lot of
some.
NHL jerseys there, not just the two that were playing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Leafs and the pros and cons of Nylander at center. What have you seen, and what do you see in that game that he played?
Well, he was originally drafted as a center. That's how he's actually listed. Um, so I think part of the thinking behind doing that is to sort of try to spread out their scoring, just to sort of distribute it a little more evenly because you got Matthews, then you've got Tavares, then you've got Nylander as the 1, 2, 3 headed monster up the middle. But it remains to be seen if he can actually handle his own line. they've tried that experiment before, but the unfortunate thing was they tried that experiment mid-season, um, when just tendencies and habits sort of get crystallized already. Um, I mean, realistically, though, the hope is that it could give the Leafs three dangerous lines instead of just two, which could help bolster the team's even strength offense. The problem with that is, um, because they're putting another one of their top six players down on the third line, as it were. It compromises the offensive integrity of the first two lines because he's a big play driver and assist maker for them. So, um, leaving him to play without a star winger at 5v5, leaving Tavares, sorry, to play without a star winger at 5v5 could potentially be an issue in the long run.
Yeah, I don't think with power play and penalty killing, that's an adjustment for giving a player ice time, an adjustment upward. So I'm not really worried. It'd be great if they rolled three lines all the time, or they rolled four lines all the time. The whole point is they're looking for a third really good center, and they're asking him to be that guy, or at least maybe not asking him. They're figuring out whether he can be that guy. So that third line center, the Leafs have a lot of guys who played center playing the wing. So it's not like they're desperate to have him play center. To your point, they could play him up, in the top six instead of the top nine. But that's something. I don't think we can make a final decision based on one game. I'm not sure we could do that. Let's talk about the Canucks and their backup goaltending.
So it's an interesting situation that we find ourselves in here. And it especially becomes more relevant with the discussion we had last week about the surfeit of goalies that we're currently seeing out there. Um, the issue here is that Spencer Martin wants to be Thatcher Demko's backup. The problem is that Canucks coach Rick Tocchet made a play for Casey DeSmith, who they acquired from the Montreal Canadiens last Tuesday, and he's going to be the one who's starting up, backing up Demko. So this is one of those situations where there's a bit of a log jam here. Um, Now, Martin is looking to start the season in the NHL after the team sent him down to the Abbotsford Canucks last February. But he says he's been feeling a lot better and he's confident that he can make the team out of camp.
Nikita Zadorov speaks out against Putin and the war in Ukraine. There's a dangerous move. Gangster politicians aren't. There's nothing they could do that's beneath them.
No, but Zadorov said that he thought it was important for him to speak about this personally. It just sucks what's going on over there. I just think it's important to be vocal. Um, he says in the discussion that he had with other goalies, in specific, Sergei Bobrovsky was also mentioned. He said, "Look, we had a chat. It went in two different directions. Some guys were against saying anything. Some people were for it. I'm not going to bring up names because we're all playing in the same league, and I don't think it's the right way to do it. But there's a lot of young kids thinking the way that I think," says Zadorov. It's just they don't have a voice to speak out like this, but now hopefully they can
And
feel
fear.
feel the support. Yeah, I mean,
And
his
fear.
family
Real
are back in
fear.
Russia. His family are back in Russia, so there
Yeah.
are real consequences potentially for him.
We're talking about a place where the people who speak out against Putin for some unknown reason, even if they're in a wheelchair, end up flying out of 4 and 5 and 6 story windows. You
Yeah,
know,
it's a genuine concern. It's
absolutely. I mean, I admire the kid for doing that, and unfortunately, there isn't enough of that. And if more people did what he did, people like Putin wouldn't accomplish doing what they're doing because then everybody would rebel against them. As long as bullies like that handle most of the people, they keep being bullies. It's when everybody finally says, or the majority of people say, you can't do this anymore. So I admire the kid for his bravery in saying that. And I pray for his family that they don't pay the price for his honesty and frankness. That's one time you don't want to be candid and frank. I'm telling you, it's a bit scary, pun intended. Let's go to Canada, and apparently there's the Jewish group. There's a Jewish group that wants an apology from the MPs because of the honoring of a Nazi that fought for Ukraine as a Nazi.
it is a bit of an oops. Um,
It was an oops, right? Nobody can
yeah,
say that it was done on purpose, right? So
what
we can start there.
I'd like to believe that Anthony Rota was not aware of this individual's history when he introduced him. But when Volodymyr Zelensky came to Ottawa on Friday, MPs in the House of Commons honored a 98-year-old gentleman by the name of Yaroslav Hunka, who fought for the 1st Ukrainian Division, also known as the 14th Waffen SS Division, during the Second World War. He was praised as being a Ukrainian hero for fighting against the Russians. However, what Anthony Rota seemed to have forgotten is that Russia was an ally during the
At
Second
that
World
time,
War, and we
at
were
that
not
time,
at odds with them. Yes.
at that time, they were
Yeah.
they were on our side. Yeah. That
So,
well, this is something that, you know, appearances and consideration for people and the history that they've lived, right? Where because we're not really, and it's getting worse, right? We're becoming less and less educated about our history. That a lot of a lack of awareness will lead to stuff like this, and unfortunately, whenever you do something, and in this case, what happened in Parliament, somebody does something and stops at the part where, oh, he's a ex-soldier of the Ukraine, and don't dig in deeper. This is what happens. I don't think he knew, and
no.
I do think he truly is sorry. um, but we can never forget, and that's unfortunately the truth. We can never, history is a great teacher, and the only way to not repeat bad history is to know your history. So in this case, history was sharpened a little bit, that Ukraine wasn't always on our side.
No, exactly. And current enemies doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't our allies at one point in the past either. So
Right.
that's I think a lesson learned here. I'm not sure what the fallout will be for Anthony Rota, but we'll have to see what happens in the coming weeks.
This feeds to the Nazi narrative of Ukraine. This will feed into that for some people. You know that, Aaron. Some people are going to say, "See, they are Nazis."
Yeah,
This is the
and
bad thing about it.
yeah, the dude's 92.
Yeah.
All of this happened 70 years ago. You 70, 80 years ago now. You have to appreciate that and understand that over time people can change.
And well, and you
So
got to also put in context. This I just sounds like we're making excuses for the guy, but I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this anyway. It also depends where they fit in the marching orders part of the situation, right? It's different if he was a general who was a Nazi, or a foot soldier that was fighting for his country and could not fight for his country. Either he goes away or he fights for his country. To make that decision, making that decision compared to the decision of, you know being a Nazi through and through, those are two different people. And I think we need to judge by your words, if I understand you correctly, and I agree with you, we judge those two different people differently, because one's all in, the other one's going, I can't be out, getting dragged in, if you will.
yeah,
But still, the point of it is that he represented something that was bad, that we believe is bad. I don't believe any war should be fought on the basis of intimidation and racism. It's just not defending oneself is different. Offensive racism is another thing. And that's what we've got in Ukraine today, where they're being attacked, they're being killed, they're being bombed. There's no question. And I can understand why the speaker wanted to put this little, 92-year-old guy there going, we have one of your guys here that's fought for your country before, not realizing.
just on the wrong side.
Yeah, sorry.
You
Well,
know,
mistake. Well, apology should be given. It should be, if sincere, accepted. And more importantly, we should all understand that that is the complication of life in general. That's what history teaches us, is that not every situation is a straight line. There's zigzags everywhere. There's a nuance. And that's why when we judge people going back in history, we have to also take into consideration the framework around their lives at that time. It's fair to say that a large majority of people were racist back in the 1900s or 1800s. It's a safe bet because everybody said, "Oh, it's okay. Black people they can be slaves. It's all right. It's not a big deal. They let it happen." But today, we don't feel that way. The majority of us don't feel that way. So we can't judge everybody back then the way we judge them today. We have to put things in perspective. And
Yeah,
I and
judging
yeah,
past behavior by current societal norms is not it's not valid.
it
It's not.
yeah, it's just
There's so much
crazy.
context that is missed.
Absolutely. And it's like taking somebody on a personal level. We as individuals have growth, right? We start here and then we end up here, and in the interim we learn about things, right? Well, I learned about stuff here that I'm being blamed for that I didn't learn over here. And it's a process. Being alive is a process. Being a human being is a process. And societies, they go through process as well. Let's talk about a celebration by Jewish groups as they celebrate Quebec man sentenced to 15 months for fomenting hatred.
So there was a gentleman by the name of Gabriel Soyer-Chaput who wrote almost 800 articles for an online publication called The Daily Stormer, which was named after a Nazi-era propaganda newspaper, Der Stürmer. Both the prosecution and defense had recommended a 3-month sentence followed by probation. But one of the judges, Manilo Del Negro, flatly rejected that proposal, which he described as unhinged, and instead imposed a sentence of 18 months with 3 years probation. This is because Soye Chapu insisted on spreading anti Semitic articles that promoted and spread hatred through a website that had a rather extensive reach before it was, before it finally peaked, as it were. Um, Now, Manilo Del Negro said Friday that Soye Chapu's apology seemed opportunistic rather than sincere, and that the accused's interest in seeking therapy and recent community service seemed aimed at currying favor with the court rather than reflecting a sincere desire for change. He cited a pre-sentencing report that suggested Soye Chapu presented a moderate risk of recidivism due to his failure to renounce his ideology, and therefore felt that the 18-month sentence and 3 years probation was appropriate.
Absolutely. Let's talk about PEI and Senator following PEI's lead on non-disclosure agreements.
So this is something that's come out of a law that was actually enacted in PEI last year, called the Can't Buy Silence Act, which would limit the use of non-disclosure agreements to quiet victims of harassment and sexual misconduct. Um, this is a bill that they were introduced in the Senate by Mary Lou McPhedran, and it contains key similarities with the PEI Can't Buy Silence Act. Um, Basically, the idea is uh, they're trying to limit uh, and redefine the individuals that people who sign NDAs are allowed to talk to about their certain situations in order to prevent people who have been assaulted and harassed and who are victims of sexual misconduct from actually telling their stories.
Yeah, they're doing. What this does, in my opinion, my interpretation is when people are paying damages, right? You're paying for the act that you committed that raises those damages as being paid, right? You're paying those damages because of what you did. There shouldn't be a rider on there that says, "Well, you can't tell anybody that you did those damages." That should be that. That's the whole point. Is that if they've done something wrong, then they've done something wrong. So the perpetrator has to be stuck with the fact that now there's a red flag on them for behavior, and now that behavior it's known now as existing, and any repeat of that puts you on a sliding scale of you get punished even more because now you are a repeat offender. But signing an NDA protects people from, well, repeat offenders, quite frankly. So I agree with it. I don't think NDAs are something that should happen. But if you have money, you can silence people, and that's what this is about. Alberta debate over Canada pension plan. What?
Yeah. Alberta's claiming that well, there's a third party report that Alberta has paid for that basically says Alberta should get $334 billion, or 53% of the value of the CPP assets, should it leave in 2027 following the required 3-year notification period. Um, so they're basically trying to play the aggrieved spouse in this divorce from the Canada pension plan and get as much money as they possibly can out of it to act as a nest egg for them funding their own pension plan. Um,
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. NASA first asteroid samples land on Earth after release from spacecraft.
So there's actually the Osiris Rex spacecraft is what we're talking about here. Um, the samples were parachuted into the Utah desert at the end of a 7-year journey. They released the capsule from about 63,000 miles or 100,000 kilometers out, and it landed basically on military property as the mothership set itself off after another asteroid. So, kind of a successful launch and retrieval. The pebbles and dust delivered Sunday actually represent the biggest haul from beyond the moon. Preserved building blocks from the dawn of our solar system. These samples are going to help scientists better understand how Earth and life formed and provide an extraordinary glimpse of 4.5 billion years ago. Uh, so,
Wow.
it, Osiris Rex was actually launched in 2016, sorry, and grabbed rubble in 2020. By the time it actually got back to Earth, it'd flown about 6.2 billion kilometers. So,
Wow.
quite a long haul to get beach dust.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, so was this. This was amazing. Thanks for doing this. My computer was very slow. Man, I didn't think I'd make it. I really didn't. Technology sometimes is a big issue. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Frank.
He's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Candid Frank Live. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Until then.